Good evening, everyone. The Clovis Citizens Advisory Committee meetings are open to the public at the physical address listed above. There are numerous ways to participate in the Citizens Advisory Committee meetings. You are able to attend in person. You may participate virtually by joining the WebEx meeting, and you may view the meeting, which is webcast and accessed at www.cityofclovis.com/CAC. Members of the public will be able to make verbal comments via WebEx by raising their hand in the virtual meeting or messaging the host to join the queue to speak. Participants desiring to make a verbal comment via WebEx will need to ensure that they access the meeting with audio transmission capabilities. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could we please, LaDonna Snow, would you please lead us in a flag salute? Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call on the clerk. Will you please take roll?
All members of the CAC are present with the exception of Enrique Avila, Lauren Butler, Elba Gomez, Kintutu Kalabi, Chris Milton, David Samarco, Jay Burke, and Rachel Udelman.
Thank you very much. And are they participating on via WebEx?
At this time, we only have Eulalio Gomez on WebEx.
And just for the record, were there any of those members that not present gave any indication that they wanted to be removed from the committee or were not able to help and participate at this time?
No.
All right, thank you very much. Opening business this evening, technology review by Carrie Cha. Carrie, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to do a quick review. If you are going to be speaking at any point during the meeting, you do have to press on the red button until it turns green on the mic, and you have to hold it for the entire duration that you're speaking. If you let go, we won't be able to hear you anymore, and the people joined on WebEx will not be able to hear. We just want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to hear everyone speak throughout the meeting. If there are any questions, please just raise your hand and let us know. We will have staff available around the room to help you out with your mic if you're experiencing any technical difficulties. That is all I have, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to practice that right now. It's green. We're in good shape. At this time, we're going to have the approval of the minutes from the January 26, 2022 meeting, Citizen Advisory Committee. Could I have a motion, please? And we have a second, please. A first and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Approval of minutes.
Chair, I just want to clarify that was motion by member LaDonna Snow and seconded by Jacob Ulam or Jim Barris. Sorry. Thank you.
All right, on to our regular agenda. Our regular agenda items are matters on the Citizens Advisory Committee agenda, which are open to public for comments. Members of the public will have an opportunity to comment on each individual item. Public comments will be heard after the presentation of an item and before the committee takes an action. This evening, we have presentation of current police department status by Police Chief Mr. Kurt Fleming, Chief Kurt Fleming. Let's see. Chief, if you're ready, you're up and good to go.
All right, can you guys hear me? All right. Thank you, Chair Casado. Appreciate that. Again, I just want to thank everybody. I know that last week, think it's super important what we're going to be discussing over the next few months. And I really appreciate each of you taking the time away from your families to dedicate to this committee. Just seeing some of the questions that came in since the last meeting that we had, I can tell that you guys are definitely very involved and looking at the details, and some of the questions are going to take us a little bit of time to dig up the information to provide to you. So I'm going to give you a kind of a snapshot of what we originally talked about, and then some of the questions that came up over the last 4 months since my presentation. And then at the end, I'm going to open it up. Really, a large part of this is really for you guys to ask questions of me. And then if I can answer those today, I will answer those. If I can't, we'll go back, get the information, and try to cover that over the next 2 meetings, or we'll get that out to you in an email format if it's just data or something that you guys are looking for. All right, so what I'm going to start, this is weird, so I'm going to walk around here a little bit. I really just want to tell you guys a little bit about me, because I don't think we've talked about that. So I've been in law enforcement for 23 years. Born and raised in the city of Fresno, went to Bullard High School, graduated in 1994. Really couldn't stand the city of Clovis when I grew up because I went to Bullard High, so we hated Clovis. So I went to Fresno State, got both my bachelor's and master's degree. During that time in between the 2 degrees, I went to the police academy here in Fresno. Got hired by the city of Fresno, worked at the Fresno Police Department in 1999, and then I worked there until 2006. While I was there, I was on the district crime suppression team, worked patrol. My last 3 years were in motors, and I worked the entire city of Fresno. So coming from Fresno to Clovis, it really gave me a unique perspective, working in a big city, a lot of violent crime, very busy, and then coming to the city of Clovis. And I'll be honest with you, when I got here in 2006, it took me really 2 years to truly understand what Clovis was all about. And I questioned, did I make the right decision? But at one point it clicked, and I said, okay, I understand this, that the city, from every department, the police department, the community is really all united, and there is zero tolerance for people that don't follow the rules, people that commit crimes. Zero crime is acceptable in our city. And that's been the culture of our department. We do everything we can to ensure crime doesn't happen and prevent it before it does. So fast forward to 2019, I became the chief of police for the city of Clovis. And over the last 15 years, 16 years of being here, I've seen it change. And I think a lot of the chiefs before me, Chief Davis, Chief Zulum, Chief Baskell, have all, I guess, shared their concerns of the direction we're going, and we're starting to lose that culture, and came to council and expressed those concerns. So I felt that it was a good time to go back to Jim Zulum's study in 2006 and kind of do that today. And that's what you guys saw in that presentation. It was kind of, let's look back at how we did it back in 06. Let's look at today and see where we're at. So the first slide is really, I just want to recap what you guys, hopefully everybody watched that presentation, so I don't want to go through all that again, but really what you should have taken away from that presentation. If you didn't, I failed. So I'll make sure I cover it right now. The takeaways were, we did a data-driven study. There's many ways to look at staffing for police departments. Per capita is kind of a common one that people throw out with numbers. What we wanted to do is look at our unique city, our department, the calls that come in, the type of service we want to provide, and how much staff do we need to meet those goals. And so that study looked at a 15-year period of time. During that time, our population went from 86,000 to roughly about 123 now, which is 37,000 increase in population. During that same time, our positions at the police department as sworn officers have actually decreased by 12. 4 funded, but 12 vacancies right now that we had from 2006, 2007 to where we currently are. And then you saw a number of programs, PAL, DARE, a number of proactive units that we had that we have completely eliminated and reallocated our resources into patrol. The study at the end really said that we need 18 additional bodies in patrol to meet that 30-30 split, to be proactive and reactive. So really 32 total bodies. If we infill the positions that we vacated to supplement patrol, we would, if we were able to get the 32 bodies, I put 16 in patrol right now, 16 in investigations, and then bring in some CSOs to supplement those additional 18 to 22 that the consultant was talking about to meet our need in patrol. So to complicate things 10 times over, we don't only have a staffing issue, we have a market issue of being competitive with the Fresno Police Department and also with the Sheriff's Department. In the last 2 weeks, the Fresno Police Department came to a contract deal with their city. And at the end of that 3-year period of time, if you take into account retirement, where they pay 11% into retirement, our officers pay 16%. They're going to be making about 14% more than our officers, which becomes a huge issue for recruitment and retention. Our contract is up in July. We're going to start negotiating, and we'll kind of see where we fall. But what that does for me right now is my recruitment, kind of have the momentum going of recruiting people. All that's going to stop until we settle on our contract, depending on where we're at. It probably sets us back a good year for a lot of recruits coming into our department. So in the last year, just to talk about recruitment, we lost 14 officers, and I talked about this in the prior presentation. Half of those were resignations to other departments, which we've never seen, and is a big concern for me. Typically, people come to Clovis from other agencies, they stay here for a career and then retire. Very rarely will they leave and go to another agency, unless it's a state agency, maybe DOJ or something like that, but very rarely to another police department. And then last year, we've seen that occur. So last year, we lost 14 people to retirements and resignations, and we hired 14 people. So we broke even, but in reality, we're actually set back because currently we have 10 of those officers are in the training program. So for the next 6 to 8 months, they're side by side with another officer in the car, and that's 10 less people that we can actually staff the streets with. So we're actually going backwards at this point. I wanted to bring this slide up again because I think it's important. This is an original presentation. We're shooting for like a 1.2, 1.15 per capita, I think would put us where we need to be. We're currently at 0.82, and this is all cities in the state of California with a population in excess of 100,000, and we're third from the bottom. And how many officers we have per 1,000 in population is what that number represents. So the city of Fresno has 1.45. I'm definitely not asking for that. That would put us at almost 200 officers. We don't need that. But I think 1.15, 1.2 would put us where we need to be. The study back in 06 for Chief Zulum came in at 1.3. I don't think we personally need that. I think we need the officers, but we also need the support staff, the community service officers, other people that can respond to calls that don't necessarily need an officer. And in the last 15 years, our staffing, how we deploy resources, and really to Chief Baskel's kind of saw the vision that, hey, we can't hire officers. Let's get some community service officers. Let's take the burden off the police officers and have a non-sworn respond to some of these calls that we can handle with a non-sworn. So our department in the last 15 years has went from 33% under Chief Zulum civilianized to now 39%. So we've had a 6% shift in our workforce becoming more non-sworn than sworn, and our sworn staff has actually shrunk in that last 15 years. So there's really two questions that have come up since my last presentation to council in November. One of them is, you're the safest city in the valley. How do we continue to maintain that? And we haven't added any additional officers to the force. The other question is the budget has increased by 60, I've heard 70, up to 80% in public safety, but we haven't added any additional officers to the police department. So I'm going to answer those two questions tonight, and a few others. And then hopefully by the end, if you guys have some additional questions, I'd love to answer those as well. So the safest city in the valley is, the concept came from, it's one of our department's 3 goals. I think Chief Baskell would know better than I, but I think it started probably 25, 30 years ago. Our department has 3 goals, this being one of them. And how this is measured is looking at cities from Bakersfield to Modesto, and there's 14 cities that we compare to. And what we use is the California Crime Index. It's called the CCI. So every department annually reports all their crime stats. And there are only 6 crimes that the state takes into account for the CCI. It's homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, and motor vehicle theft. So they take that data at the end of each year. It gets crunched, it gets compared to your population size, and they come up with a number. We take that number, and that's how we compare to those 14 cities, and we decide if we're the safest city in the Central Valley. Problem with that is, in 2014, a proposition called Proposition 47 got passed, and that really changed the apple-to-apple comparison, how we've always compared ourselves to figure out where we fall for safest city, really changed how that's calculated, the CCI. So just to give you an example, in 2014, our CCI, and you can look in the budget books, our goal was to try to achieve a CCI of 2,000 or under. This year, our CCI, or this past year, was 583. So since Prop 47 got passed, a number of crimes got decriminalized from felonies to misdemeanors. The CCI index just completely went down. A lot of our crimes that were high in the CCI historically have been property crimes. All those property crimes have been reduced to misdemeanors. So our numbers have just nosedived. It looks like we're just doing amazing work right now. So as an example, this chart represents 2010 to 2020. So in the last 10 years, our crime has went down 54%. So does anybody in here believe that either Fresno crime is reduced by 32%, that Fresno and Clovis today are safer cities than they were 10 years ago? If you do, then the CCI is right on for you. But if you go by the CCI, all of our cities are safer today. So really, the judge that we use to judge ourselves as being a safer city is really a flawed metric. And it's something we need to look into to decide how do we measure overall safety, quality of life, and all those things to see if we truly are the safest city in the valley. So at the same time, the CCI shows a 29% increase in aggravated assaults and 108% increase for us in the last 10 years. Aggravated assaults are things that are considered assault with a deadly weapon, a criminal threat with some type of follow-up. Somebody threatens to kill you, then actually shows up at your house to follow through with it. Those type of things fall under aggravated assault. So in the last 10 years, ours has gone up 108%, but our CCI has actually fallen and shown that we're a safer city. So I can't figure it out, but I wanted to point that out to you. Also wanted to point out this last year in 2021, we picked out everything that increased more than 10%. And these are all crimes in our city that have increased. Theft of vehicle parts, and that's not a small number, like they went from 4 to 12. We've had a huge increase. This is all catalytic converter thefts. We're seeing a lot of those throughout the city. Arson. So we do all our arson investigations for our city. Our fire department will go out and do an actual assessment to try to figure out the origin of where the fire started, but we actually do all the criminal investigative work and follow through for the arson. Robberies up 27%. The month of January, we had 11 robberies, which is the highest month total in the last 3 years that we've seen. And then weapons violations, and you kind of go through those. But the highest one, the most concerning one, is our homicides. So last year we had 5 homicides. 2019 we had 0. 2020 we had 1, and then last year we had 5. So I mean it's a 400% increase, but that should be our biggest concern, and reducing those and making sure they're not happening in our city. All right, so budget. It's been, I'm gonna try to move here without. I think this is one of the most important slides because it's been brought up that our budget has increased in the last 10 years by 70 to 80%. Numbers have been thrown out there. So our budget has increased 68% in the last 10 years, exactly 68%. But if you compare, and I'm not trying to pit us against any other department in the city, but we should look at comparisons and how other departments have grown throughout the city as well. The finance department, which Jay oversees, you have grown 68%, correct? So the city manager is 70, general services 76. There's some others that are a little bit below us and on. I think the next meeting will probably show that a little bit further, every department and how much they've grown. But I just want to show on a trend line that we're trending consistent with other departments and we're not just blowing money out the doors with the police department. Because some of the stuff that's been said, it seems like that is occurring. So our budget's grown 68%. How come we haven't had any officers? And I think that's a good question, and I want to answer it for you. So of the last 10 years, the budget increased at 68%. So that 68% equates to $15.4 million. That's 93% of that $15.4 million is in those first 10 line items. Those are directly out of our budget. Those are line items. So salaries has increased in the last 10 years, 5.9 million, retirement 2.5, internal services charges, which are things like our power bill. We built a animal shelter out, Miss Winkles. That's the debt service on that building. We buy new cars or get oil changes. Our city shop maintains our vehicles. That gets charged back to us. We get computers put into our police cars. IT purchases them. They bill it back to us, and it comes through that internal services fund. Health benefits plan, as everybody's seen in the private sector, government, health plans have increased a ton here in the last 6 years. It's affected us equally the same. Workers' comp, liability, retirement, miscellaneous, which is our professional staff employees, fleet leases for our vehicles. Cto buyback is just if an officer works extra time but doesn't want the cash at that point, they can bank that time and then pull it out later. But we have to have the money, so if any time they want to cash it out, we have to be able to cash that out. And then holiday buyout. So if we took it 3 more lines down, I didn't want to put too much on this slide, but if we went down to items 11, 12, and 13, number 11's overtime increase. The increase in overtime has gone up in the last 10 years, 291,000 increase. CAD services, which is our Axon body cams, all the storage associated with that, our tasers, that's $282,000 a year. And then our special team premium, so anybody that's a detective, a motor officer gets hazard pay. If you're on call 24/7, you get an extra $250 a month. That's that special team premium pay. So if you add those up, that's 765,000. 13 line items account for 98% of that increase from the past 10 years. I can get down and tell you exactly the last 2%. It's really associated with technology. We house over 500 cameras in the city. Pelco used to be here, years ago. They provided a lot of those cameras because we were kind of a test agency for free. Maintained them for us. That's gone by the wayside. So all those cameras, the storage that's associated with them, we've incurred all that cost over the last 10 years. And then we have 2 full-time employees that are housed in the police department that go out and maintain all that equipment. So a lot of that last 2% is associated with that. So 2007, I just want to point this out because there's really a few key things that we haven't grown as a department. The budget has increased. Back in 2007, before the recession, we had 113 officers. Today we have 109, but we have 101 filled. Prior to COVID, we had 109. COVID hit, the city wasn't really sure how this is going to impact us fiscally. I had 9 vacancies as the new chief, and I found out very quickly if you don't have your positions filled, you'll lose them. So I lost those 9 positions, And it was really a safety valve to get us through COVID. And then we found out it didn't really impact us as much. So over the last 2 years, I've been given those positions back. And then in November or December this last year, council meeting, they gave us the final 3 positions. So we're back to 109. I think the 16th of this month, I'll have 2 more officers. We'll be up to 103. And hopefully, but before June, July, we'll have 109 officers staffed up, but they'll be in that training process and hopefully making it through and getting out there on the streets. Something else, just to note, we had 117 full-time employees back in 2007. So that's all professional staff employees and sworn officers equate to 170. Today, we have 179. So in 15 years, we've gained 9 positions. And like I said earlier, we've grown 6% in non-sworn positions. So a majority of those are professional staff employees that we brought on. So how are we meeting the needs of a city that's growing, that's almost 38,000, 40 in population increase? How are we still meeting the needs and responding to the calls and getting there in less than 5 minutes and meeting our goals? If you watch that original presentation, it was moving staff, reallocating staff, cutting programs, shifting and hiring CSOs and adding those to the patrol staff. But back in 2007, we had 94 available employees or officers available to work patrol. If you take out vacancies, people that are injured, typically 10% are out on workers' comp. And then your management position. So me, my captains, lieutenants, we're not out responding to calls. We couldn't be assigned to patrol theoretically, but yeah, you probably wouldn't want me responding. So 94 officers out of that 113 back in 07 were available for patrol. So back then they had youth services, they had a motor unit of 5 and a sergeant, they had investigations, their narcotics, their gang unit, their planning neighborhood services, all those officers and their patrol staff. So 68% of the 94 were dedicated to patrol. Now we have less staff, but we've increased the percentage of our staff that's dedicated to patrol. So that's how we're meeting the need. We're just basically taking every position we have outside of patrol. We're moving them into patrol. We're vacating positions in task force throughout the county, Magic, ACT. Our motor unit's down to 2. Really, it's 1 because the other one's a supervisor. And we put all those people back in patrol. We don't have a communications supervisor over our dispatch anymore. That's a lieutenant. I have 3 vacancies, or 2, soon to be 3 vacancies in my command staff. I have 4 sergeant vacancies right now that I can't fill because I can't afford to promote people and take them out of the position of responding to calls. So I just thought it was interesting that this is, if you're wondering how are you still doing this, it's because we're completely dismantling the department to meet the core function of responding to calls, because that's the most important thing. When you call, we get there fast, have a smile on our face, and take care of business. So this is just a recap of the original presentation. I thought it was important to point out, again, I'm not going to go through all these, but these are all the programs over the last 15 years. Very important things of being preventative, all the things that we talk about in the last couple of years of reimagining law enforcement. It's getting back into the community, having that relationship. These are all the things we were doing 15 years ago, but we don't have the staff to do them today. So I won't go through. You guys have seen that in the original presentation. Well, I messed that one up. I was going to ask you, how many officers do you think we have on the streets right now tonight as we speak? 10. I ruined it. Sorry. So for a city of the size of 122,000, 25 square miles right now, patrolling the city, there's 10 officers, which I think would be surprising for most. I was wanting to see your guesses, but I messed that up, so sorry. So 10 officers can get consumed really quick. 1 call can tie up 10 officers in a hurry. Two good calls could tie them up. And that happens quite frequently. So what I wanted to do is take an opportunity to, there's a lot of things that occur in the city that people don't know about. They don't see them on TV. So if it's not on TV and I didn't hear about it, it didn't happen. So I want to give you an opportunity to see a weekend in December, a 16-hour period of time of some calls that we dealt with, and how quickly 10 officers get consumed very quick. None of these calls ever made it on the news except for one, and that was only because we made an arrest 5 days later and we put out a news release related to one of these incidents. So in a span of just 16 hours in the month of December, which is traditionally a slow month, violent crimes down, it's usually property crime because everybody's out Christmas shopping. The summer months are usually our more busy times of year. You know, people are out and a lot of violent crime during that time of year. So this is very unique for December. We had a large disturbance in Old Town, variegated domestic, and 3 shootings that occurred in 16 hours. And these aren't in just, you know, an old part of town. These aren't in, you know, a new part of town or downtown. These are spread out throughout the city. So this map, they're not plotted exactly where they're at, but they're pretty close to throughout the city where they're at. And in the background, you can kind of see that's our border of our city, and those are where the calls are at. So the first one happened at 10 o'clock a.m. in the morning. It was a domestic violence call that came into our dispatch center. Our officers responded, and when they got there, they heard of this active disturbance going on, called for additional officers before they made entry into the house. Before that occurred, the female victim came out. The male victim followed and then saw us and went back inside. Come to find out, he's barricaded inside. He's a wanted at-large parolee. We have a good domestic violence call, an assault with a deadly weapon that occurred, and he's an actively wanted parolee. Shortly thereafter, we get a call from a neighbor. We think it's a neighbor that says there's a male running, jumping fences, and has a handgun and is running from this location. So our officers luckily were smart enough to kind of hold the perimeter, and come to find out it was the guy inside that's wanted that's calling us in, trying to get us to chase after him. So we set up on this call, started calling out our SWAT team because he was known to have a firearm that had been seen that day. Our SWAT team comes out, our crisis negotiation team comes out. So that's not a team that we have in the city at all times. These are people at our home. There are people that are working patrol that are part of the SWAT team. That call gets made. We have to wait for them to respond out. Our crisis negotiation team is our negotiators. They get called out. So by 12 o'clock, 12:30, we get a majority of those people established and get a call into him and get him to come out. And he ended up complying, and we got him into custody. So all 10 people in the city at that time are on this call. So as you're calling in for, you know, some guy at the local liquor store causing problems, or at Walmart or wherever, creating an issue for you, we're not able to respond unless it's a very high priority call. We're going to call the Sheriff's Department, Fresno PD, and see if they can come in and assist us in responding to that call. So during that same time, we get a call. So we had to break a couple of people away from this call to go out to a check the welfare call. Family had been going out and can't get a hold of their son. They live out of town, calling, no response. He's supposed to be at some family event and they're not getting any response. So we end up sending one officer, one or two over there. They end up going in the house and finding a male deceased that had been shot multiple times. So now we got a homicide. So now we're calling out crime scene. We still got the active parolee barricaded domestic going on. We got our crime scene team coming out, and now our detectives coming out to work this homicide case. And then, so that's all going on. The homicide case is still going on into the night. And then we start getting calls later that night. The sun goes down 8 o'clock at night. The bowling alley on Shaw, we got a large disturbance, multiple shots fired in the parking lot. We get there, there's cars taken off. There's shell casings in the parking lot. We find some blood, and we got a ton of witnesses to contact and looking for evidence and cameras. So it takes a lot of bodies, a lot of officers to deal with that. And so shortly thereafter, a couple hours later, we get a large disturbance in Old Town, same thing. We had 7 officers on that call tied up with a disturbance down there where we made a couple of arrests in that case. So fast forwarding a couple hours later into the next morning on Sunday at 1:56, we get a call. This is in a Loma Vista neighborhood. It's probably a 6-year-old neighborhood. 50 shots fired. We got multiple neighbors calling in, a couple houses that were struck with gunfire. One of the bedrooms that was struck like 3 times. There's a 11-year-old kid sleeping on the other side of that. So luckily nobody was hurt. We did get video from that I want to show you guys real quick. It's some Ring video from one of the neighbors. I wanted to present it to you and show it, but the person that provided it to us was really hesitant originally because they were fearful of retaliation. So we went ahead and put a different picture over the top of it. Still have the same audio so you can hear it because we want to protect their privacy, the one with their house identified. Because the subjects that left this call, we ended up contacting multiple people. This was an Airbnb house. A party was thrown at this house. We stopped multiple cars. They're dog pound gang members that came into our city to use a house to have a party and end up shooting 50 rounds off in the middle of the night. And thank God nobody was hurt. So we made several arrests that night. We recovered several firearms. We had our special enforcement team work this for the next couple weeks, and we ended up making one more arrest and recovering another firearm related to this. But all these calls would consume all 10 of the officers, all of those officers in a moment. And what I'm telling you is we had to call in multiple people on overtime to help supplement our officers. So that's I mean, it sounds like a war zone, honestly. And the original cameras out somebody's front yard, their driveway, you see the Christmas tree, Christmas light decorations, and you got this, shooting happened down the street. This is the actual neighborhood. It's not where it happened. We just took a generic shot of the neighborhood to show you kind of what it looks like. It's any normal neighborhood in Clovis. So this stuff is happening everywhere in the city. Nobody knows about this because it never hit the news. But I thought it was important just to bring up to you. There's things that go on in our city every day that a lot of us don't realize. So at the end of the presentation, I'll just tell you now, I want to offer to everyone on the committee right now, we're not doing ride-alongs because of COVID. We are doing them for our new hires and recruits. So I'm going to extend that opportunity for you guys. If you want to go on a ride along, I think it'd be valuable to see the city of Clovis from our side, our eyes. Most of us drive the same path to work. We go to the same restaurants, the same Starbucks I do every day. And you really see the same thing, and you don't get out and see the city. And so I think it'd be valuable if you guys have the time to take the opportunity and go ride with an officer for 4 hours, 10 hours, whatever you got time. But I know John, when he took over city manager, did it. I think it's just important to sit in briefing, hear the conversations, hear the calls that went on the night before, and then go out and kind of see what the officers are dealing with in our city. So I'm going to stop talking, really. I think when I ended the first presentation with council, I told them I think we're at a crossroads. I'm going to say that again. It's kind of why we put the sign up here. Really dependent on what you guys decide, what you recommend, what you think the direction the city should move in, and make those recommendations to the city council is going to impact. I look at the line on that poll as almost the policing philosophy of Clovis. And based on the decisions you make is going to determine how I move our department in what direction and how we start providing resources and deploying our staff even further. So we can become a reactive agency like a lot of departments are, and we're just sitting there responding to calls all day long and not preventing crime. Or we can be proactive, preventative, and doing all the things we have historically known and done and taken a zero tolerance for in the city of Clovis and continue down the path that we've known for so long. So, but proactive, preventative policing takes staff and it takes money. So if that's the direction we're going, it's a financial decision. So, but whatever you guys decide, we're committed. All the officers are committed. We're committed to, when you call the police, that we're going to get there in a timely fashion and provide you good service. If it takes dismantling everybody and putting them under patrol, that's what we're going to continue to do. But I'm telling you, it's a mathematical equation that is just doomed for failure at this point. Just one thing I forgot to talk about was our overtime, just as an example. Our overtime last year we have several overtime accounts. The one just to fill shifts that are vacant on patrol is shift coverage overtime. Last year we had 223,000, and that's where we came in at budget. I think we're budgeted for 250. This year we are already at our budget. We're at 100%, and we're on pace to be at 161% of that line item in that budget. That is not sustainable. That's holding people over on day shift to cover swing shift. That's bringing swing shift in early to help out with the day shift or graveyards. That's ordering people in from home on their days off because somebody called in sick, somebody's injured, and we don't have the bodies. Because we have a bare minimum, there'll be this many officers on the street. And if somebody calls in, you're getting called at home and you're getting ordered in no matter what you got going on. So those things can't continue long term, but that's where we're at right now. So I'm going to open up. The last slide was just right along, which I already talked about, but I really want to open it up to you guys. If there's questions, since you watched that presentation, questions that as you're doing research or talking to other people that you have questions that you want me to answer, I'd be happy to. If there's things that you want us to present over the next couple of meetings that are more detailed on budget or whatever, we'll write those down now. I know there's some questions, or Andy will, there's some questions that have already come in. We're working on responses for because they're a little bit detailed, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chief, thank you very much. That was very enlightening and very much appreciated. Thank you very much. I wanted to take a quick minute just to, before I lost track of it, was to thank of all of our city staff that is here with us this evening. Thanks for all your help in helping us organize the get together tonight to help all of us out here, the audience, understand and get a clear picture of what our objectives are and trying to deal with them this evening. We are going to open it up to just general comments or questions with our committee first, and then we'll open it up to any comments or questions from the public. If anybody has anything they want to just start out, Kurt, I'm going to let you, where are you? Run the show and just call on any hands that may be out there if you'd like.
I don't want to get yelled at by the city clerk. So Chief, you talked about overtime hours and, I run a business, I understand that. So if each additional officer that you bring on, how many overtime hours would that alleviate? Because there's a cost factor there. So each officer being paid regular time versus, how many overtime hours would that take away? And I know that's a very complicated mathematical formula, but is there just kind of a general consensus on one new sworn officer will alleviate this many overtime hours?
In reality, for staffed appropriately, for shift coverage, there should be zero because we build all our shifts to have a minimum. We always have it built, 2 or 3, 4 officers. It'd be nice to have 4 officers over that minimum. So if somebody calls in sick, we send somebody to training. Maybe there's a SWAT officer that they're off on shift because they're training that day and they're not working patrol. But we have that buffer built in so we don't have any overtime. So overtime should really be somebody calls off last minute and we don't have anybody to plug in. We like to just hold somebody over because it's only a 4-hour overtime. Maybe just get us to the graveyard shift versus, calling somebody in from home for 10 hours and now we chewed up an extra 6 hours that we really didn't need to spend. So if we're appropriately staffed and have the bodies that we need, overtime on shift coverage really should be minimal. I don't know, going back historical and looking at when we were staffed appropriately, how much that was reduced and how much that's grown over the years, but that's something we could probably dig up and kind of show a trend line based on staffing levels. Did that decrease or increase? I know Chief Basco will probably speak better to it, but since I've been chief, we haven't been over in that line item. This will be the first year and we're going to go over big. And you could see at the beginning of the year, we had a lot of workers' comp injuries, a ton of people retired or resigned, and we're trying to hire people, but there's such a lag, that 6 to 8 month. And like an example of a couple people that we hired, put through the academy, we trained them in the FTO program, and they didn't make it. So that's a year invested in those employees and training them, letting them work the jail, putting them in the academy that's 6 months, putting them through the field training program that's 6 months, and then finding out this is not the job for them. And that's 2 more positions we got to fill again. So really, when you can find a lateral, that's the right person that fits in with our kind of our culture and our mission of our department, and you can get them up to speed really quick, and then they're off and running, versus a new person that you're grooming from the start and you just don't know if they can do this job. So a short answer is, if we had the appropriate staffing, I think that would be very minimal overtime and shift coverage.
Chief, I have a couple questions. The first being about morale. You talk about the minimum staffing. And basically what that means, as I understand it, is there's a minimum number of people you will put on patrol on any given day or night. If for some reason, because of people calling in sick or being out on vacation, et cetera, you're not going to meet that minimum number, then an overtime officer has to come in and fill that. And although I know sometimes people look forward to the overtime, I know it also gets to the point where I think you said you have to order people in from home. They could be sitting at home on the couch with the family and suddenly take a call. It says, put on your uniform and get to work. You're coming in now. Based on what you've been describing tonight, I have to assume that as the overtime goes up, so does the frequency of order in. Have you seen this affect the morale in the troops here as this has played out?
Yeah, absolutely. 2020 was a very weird year. I happened to come in at the perfect time. A lot of weird things happened, but 2020, we got to a point where we told, we weren't getting calls. Everybody was in home. Las Vegas shut down. It's just a weird country at the time. We're world. We didn't have very many calls coming in, and we told our officers, don't do anything. Just go park and wait for calls. We don't want you out contacting people. We want to limit exposure, because we really didn't know. And so overtime was gone. I mean, we have the bare minimum people there. We don't want any extras. So when things started changing and all of a sudden crime kind of took off again, calls started coming in, we get some injuries, overtime's coming out. We got people jumping on it because they're hungry for overtime. They haven't had any overtime. So it wasn't an issue. It's to the point now where so if a shift opens up, we page out to everybody. It goes to everybody's department cell phone. Hey, there's a shift available. If you want it, call. The first one that calls gets it. So at the beginning, that was simple. Open it up, people fill it, but it's to the point now where we're opening it up and it's not getting filled, and so we call once, put it out again, and then if we go on a list and who's worked the least amount of extra shifts, they get called, and hopefully they do the right thing and answer their phone, and then they get ordered into work on their day off. And that's happening more and more frequently, that people are getting to the point that they just don't want any more overtime, so they're being ordered in. That affects family life. You're going home, or you are at dinner at kids' sporting event, and all of a sudden you have to leave, and that becomes an issue with your family. At work, you become a little bit dissatisfied. So yeah, it definitely affects morale, and it's something that is not a sustainable long term. It's something, a quick fix to plug the holes. And to answer your question earlier on the minimum, we set a minimum standard of how many officers that it's safe to staff the streets, the bare minimum. And if we go below that, somebody gets ordered in, or we page out to fill that shift.
Thank you, Chief. One more question real quick, if I may.
Your mic died.
Sorry. I've noticed a couple times here just in the past week, some articles both in conservative and liberal media outlets, Wall Street Journal and CNN, and specifically where they've actually done quite a bit of reporting on the difficulty, not just in California, but nationwide, that chiefs are struggling with to fill officer positions for a number of reasons. But it seems like they're all struggling with the retention issues that I think you were mentioning earlier in the presentation. Is it safe to say that you're probably struggling as much or more than, or at least as much as any other chief in the country right now struggling under the same?
Yeah, it's a nationwide problem right now for the professional law enforcement. You know, just the kind of the sentiment that over the last couple of years, it's not an attractive job unless it's really a calling. It's still a great profession. I would still get in it tomorrow if I was starting my first day. But it is definitely more difficult to recruit. There's less people going to the police academies. We're starting to try to recruit at a younger age to get people interested in our cadet program and other things to get interested in law enforcement. But because it's a problem for everybody, everybody's super competitive. Fresno PD started offering recruitment incentives. So we had to do that to compete. We offered recruitment incentives as well. And that helped. We got a lot of interested laterals and got first dibs on a lot of people in the academy. And but now with obviously the contract changes and not knowing what's that going to be over the next 6 months, it's going to make our recruitment efforts a lot more difficult. And the longer that goes, honestly, if we had retention issues last year, if the pay is going to be that different, it could create some retention issues within our police department, especially if there's not a lot of jobs outside of patrol. You come to Clovis, all you do is patrol. There's no traffic, there's no detectives, there's no magic, there's none of these other things to kind of break up I do 3 years in patrol, I can go do something different. If you don't have that, some officers might not be as attracted to our city and might choose to go to another department that can offer more of those variety of positions. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, it's green. Thank you for the information. And I believe we all here consider you an expert in your field. So if in a perfect world, to be proactive and have enough officers and have enough funding in your department, what do you feel that you need as far as funding dollar-wise, like per year over like the next 5 years to be sufficient to where Clovis can remain the safest city and at the same time where your department is being proactive?
So that study that was conducted by the same person did it 15 years prior and did it again, recommended that we add 18 to 22 additional officers just in patrol. That doesn't take into account the other parts. So really, if it's 16 in patrol and 16 outside would fill all those vacancies that we have. So 32 positions. We would like to hire some CSOs to supplement our officers. A community service officer is the uniform field personnel that are in a light blue uniform. They don't go to active crime scenes, active scenes where there's a suspect. It's mostly cold calls, animal control calls, evidence collection. They do handle traffic accidents where there's not injuries involved. So they're taking a burden off the police officer to allow them to be out contacting citizens or responding to calls, doing the things that we expect them to do. So the study looked at, we want our police officer out of an hour of a day to be 30 minutes of free time where they're out conducting traffic stops. They're going into local business and saying, hey, I noticed that you've had a couple issues over the last month where your shops have been broken into. How can I help you solve these issues, or what's going on? Doing those community contacts, the things that we expect, and then also having 30 minutes of time that they're being reactive and responding to calls. That's all a Northwestern study. It's based on a whole bunch of stuff. That's that good mix you want. So to get that mix, we need 16 additional officers in patrol, but I also need to supplement all those things outside. So to answer the question as far as dollar amount, an officer equates to, with roll-ups, with workers' comp costs and all that, roughly about 145, Tom. So like 150 would be a good judge for a top step officer with all the roll-ups. So roughly what I said is that we need to add 15 officers a year over the next 5 years to get to that goal, because that's to account for retirements. I have a quarter of my department that can retire in the next 5 years. 10% right now is of retirement age. And with the way things were going last year, the way things are going now with overtime and other things, some people are choosing to say, I think I'm done, I'm going to retire. So that's also a concern, because I can't control that variable. When somebody walks out the door, that's so much lost. And then having to fill that, and hopefully that person that I'm filling it with can get up to speed and actually do the job. So what I came up with in that original presentation for dispatchers, community service officers, animal control, and the police officers we needed, after 5 years of ramping up to build up to that, what we needed was 9.2 million. So it's roughly around $9 million to meet the needs right now. I'm sorry, I had my back to this whole time.
Oh, that's okay, you're fine. I just wondered if, can you hear me okay? I just wondered if you could speak a little bit, and I may be jumping ahead, but how much it costs to train an officer? So a new recruit going through the academy training process, how much does that cost per recruit? And what is your goal for keeping them and retaining them? Because obviously if we train them and pay for that and then we lose them quickly, then that's costly to the budget as well. I just wondered, that was my first part of the question. And then the second part obviously would be adding on a little bit to Drew's question in the morale and preventing burnout and keeping our officers safe and balanced in their life, you know, between everything. I know it's a very stressful job. Is there a plan to be proactive in assisting with that and retaining the officers as long as we possibly can, and how we might be able to do that in a plan, I guess is what I'm asking.
So we have our 3 top goals that we've tried to achieve historically, and then we have department priorities. So we have enforcement priorities that we put out every year, and then department priorities. And one of our department priorities is employee wellness. So we have a physical fitness program that annually that we test all of our employees, and if you're not meeting it, ultimately, if you don't pass it a couple of times, you can actually get demoted in pay. It's very stringent, and so our officers are held to a very high standard health-wise. And in the last couple of years, we actually took that a step further and looked at mental health and how do we judge and keep an eyeball on that. And so every year we do a kind of a heads up checkup, George, and it's just a program to assess to see where you're at. And maybe we need to get you some additional help to keep your head in the game and keep you going in the right direction. We offer a ton of things besides just the standard EAP. We have a ton of resources for employees to reach out to get additional help, and that is completely anonymous. And from what I heard, I don't know, but I think a lot of people take advantage of that and keeping their head clear. So that's part of it. The employee wellness side, the morale side. We try to do a ton of things to keep people motivated. Our chaplains do a great job with, you know, weekly or monthly things where we're doing some type of event to recognize officers and feed them, or have a Nacho Tuesdays or whatever we do. Just trying to keep it light. Trying to remind people that you can't control what you can't control, and let's focus on what we have control over. We can go out and enforce the law, make an arrest, and they might be out in 2 hours, but we're going to keep doing our job. We can't control the judicial, the jail system, the legislature. We can only do what our job is. And in Clovis, zero tolerance. We're going to keep making those arrests and doing what we have to do. As far as the cost associated with training program, it's hard to put a number on that. They're partnered up with the training officer, so there's not really additional cost for that part of it. It's really their 3-week orientation where we have instructors come in and teach them on all the things they need to know, defensive tactics, range training, legal stuff, all that. We have to bring, normally officers are out in different positions to come in and pay them either on duty or as an overtime position to train them. So there is money associated with that. So we try to not do one officer at a time. We'll try to, if we need to hold 3 and, you know, 6 or not 6 weeks, but if we have to hold them a couple of weeks to a month until we can get a group together, it's financially makes more sense. So we'll do that. I can go back and try to do some research. I can give you the equipment cost of hiring a new officer, basically kind of in a nutshell what the overtime is. associated with that, but it's kind of hard to put a exact number.
Sorry. I was just wondering if there was a estimated cost between hiring, putting them through the academy. I don't know how long that is. I'm assuming you pay them through the academy as full-time, and then I guess there's got to be a dollar cost per officer from, is that how you normally wish to hire them? Or are you looking for lateral moves from other agencies?
So we do three things. We have laterals that we would just, another agency, they're currently doing the job. They come in, we put them through our field training program where they're paired up with another officer, typically 6 months, and then they're released on their own. There is the recruit who just put themselves through the police academy. They graduate, we hire them, put them through the field training program, which would be this really consistent with the lateral, and then they're on their own. So there's really no cost. And then there's the what everybody's doing right now is trying to get their hands on people before they get too far along. So we're hiring people, trying to make them jailers or community service officers, doing other things to learn the job if they're younger, and we'll keep them in that position for a couple of years, then pay for them to go through the academy. So we really, that 6-month period of time, they're not an employee doing anything here, but we're paying them a salary to do that. So that 6 months would be a cost that is a loss if they don't make it through the program. But we are trying to do that more. So we're trying to build our cadet program up to 10 if we could. Right now, we just hired a kid that's 18, so he'll be in that program for 3 years before he goes into the police academy. But he's going to be dialed. Everybody loves him. He's a great kid, and he's going to get so much experience going into the police academy. And coming out at 21, he'll be way ahead of the game. So we're trying to get into the high schools, into the colleges, and recruit people into our cadet program. But really right now, plugging the holes is laterals and people in the academy that we're recruiting.
Chief, we do have some people online.
Okay.
First, we have Elba Gomez. Elba, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, Chief. A couple of questions. How much, do you have any grants that are funding in your budget right now?
We have a ton of grants. None of them are for actual positions. They're all for operations. So alcohol, we typically have every year an ABC grant, which is to go out and do bar checks, try to do minor decoys in liquor stores or establishments that sell off-sale alcohol. We have a tobacco grant where we're going out and doing smoke shops and things of that nature. And then every year we get an OTS grant to do DUI checkpoints, saturation patrols, and things of that nature. And then we have our CDBG grant, which that one actually does provide for a funded CSO, community service officer, to go out and do municipal enforcement in just particular segments of our city. And that is something we annually do have. And then we have 2 funded positions through the adult compliance team, which is a part of a task force that goes out and just contacts people that are on probation. Those are vacated right now, but both of those are fully funded through the AB 109 program. That's money that comes down from the state that pays for those officers for their vehicles, their salaries, and everything associated with that to be a part of that team. But those are 2 that we're not taking advantage of right now. And then we have 1 position, I wouldn't call it grant, but it gets paid for out of a different account from the police department that focuses on illegal dumping, recycling issues, and some other things associated with stuff with our public utilities department.
Okay.
Besides that, we don't have any like cops grants where you could hire 9 officers, and then the city after the first year has to pick up 25%, next year 50%, and then the last year 100%. Because frankly, we couldn't afford to do that. We could try to write a grant like that, and it would likely, potentially we could get it. But I don't know if my boss right now would want me to try to go out and get 10 or 15 positions that he's going to have to find out a way to pay for in the next 3 years. But
So
we are always exploring grants of any type to help.
Are those positions, are they also listed in the allocation that you have right now with your 109 allocations?
Yeah, so they are part of 109, of that number 109. So 2 of them are act funded. It's actually 110. I'll take that back. 110. One's outside of our department that's being funded, 2 within the act. And then the CDBG is actually a CSO, so it wouldn't be a police officer. So 3 of our 110 positions are funded from outside sources.
Okay, and then one last question. I understand we're all put together here to come and look at this for the police department, but are all of the other departments going through the same process where they're being put through all of this so that we can verify they can get the funding for their departments, or is it just the police department that's being put through this process?
It's just the police department. I'm the one that put myself on the hot seat because
Okay,
I just thought it was important to bring it to council, bring it to the public to say, it's a double-edged sword because I'm announcing to everybody that's a criminal in the city that we're understaffed and we're having a hard time. Is that a smart thing to do? But it needs to, we're at a point where we need to make a decision. Are we gonna grow as a department in comparison to the city, or are we gonna fall behind and become a different police department and different public safety, how we do public safety in Clovis?
thank you.
Okay, so next week, my boss, city manager, said that we're going to review a kind of a look at a 15-year period of time of staffing and budgeting. And I think that we'll look at other departments just in an overall sense, not really getting too deep into theirs like mine, but we'll just look at, you know, how's the city's grown as a general fund, enterprise fund over the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, and that's all on the agenda for our next meeting to review all of that stuff. Please throw out more hands up, questions or comments, team.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It sounds to me at this point, we're running on empty.
That's very good analysis.
I'm worried about officer health, mental health. We all know that overtime forced on an officer then becomes an issue of physical safety as they run down, they get sick, and like you said, then family issues. I'm very concerned about the state of the department. And I'm also concerned, as I told you earlier, that we're not asking for enough at this point.
And I mean, if we wanted to, yeah, there's more we could ask for, but I'm trying to be realistic to say, I believe we can do, you know, uphold the standards that we have in the past with this. I don't want to ask for way too much. I'm trying to be reasonable as the chief and be fiscally responsible. Even what I'm asking for is, I don't think it's something that we can currently, you know, achieve within our current budget constraints. But I don't know that. I mean, that's something for you guys to consider. Is it a deeper look within the city? Is it something that we need to look for other sources to help fund? I don't know those answers. That's something that's kind of outside my realm. It's really, here's where we're at and here's the tough decisions moving forward. But yeah, I am concerned morale, workers' comp increasing, people going out and not coming back, going out on medicals where they never come back. Those are increasing. I think at one point last year, we were up to 18% of our staff was out on workers' comp injuries. And that system takes a long time to go through the process and get them back. So that's just ever increasing, and that's less staff that we can utilize to be on the streets. Puts more strain on the people that are actually doing the job.
The added concern to this is as go our police department, goes our city.
The police department is, the city's unique. And if you took the police department away, it would change things. But there's other things that go into making Clovis what a Clovis is. It's the business owners, the community members coming here because you guys are concerned. It's the other departments in the city all working together, because I drive down the street and believe me, I'm calling Scott going, hey, there's lights out at the park over here. We need to change those bulbs because it looks like crap, you know, or there's trash here. And everybody concerned about the overall health of the city is important, and it accomplishes the goal. But I agree, if you took the public safety leg out of the stool, it would collapse without it. And it is important. Obviously, I'm the department head for the police department, so I'm gonna say that for sure. But I am a little biased, but I think I could argue that with anybody in here, that if you took us away or completely limited us down to bare minimum, things are going to change in our city.
Kurt, this committee needs to hear the raw facts. None of us are expecting anything, positive or minus. We just need to hear the reality, what is going on right now in the city.
Okay.
A lot of us know a lot of things and a lot of us don't know a lot of things. So for this committee to be effective and make its, recommendation to the city council, which is our ultimate objective here, we need to hear it all. The pluses, the minuses, all the budgets, the morale, everything like that. And LaDonna, you had shared earlier that some of your observations that the concern for us for consideration isn't just police officers, but you had some observations of other sides to the equation.
Into not just the officers, but the support staff, being our CSOs, our dispatchers, records clerks. When you increase your patrol, you've got to increase everything else to go along with it, including your training, your patrol cars, all the equipment that goes with it. And then you also have to allot for those step increases that these officers are going to need along the way.
Exactly. Go ahead. Questions?
Oh, yeah, too. So I'm gonna go here first and I'll go with you, Noah, after.
Okay. All right. So on the presentation, I think it was the third or fourth slide, you showed a recent study where Clovis ranks among California. Is there, or before the next meeting or at the next meeting, can we get another, it was the, yes. Can I see how Clovis ranks among the same size population within the state of California?
Absolutely. I'll even give you, before I did this or the one in November, I put out a survey of all Valley chiefs, really from Visalia to Madera, because we have a Fresno Madera group that meets once a month with all the Fresno Madera chiefs. So I put that survey out to all those chiefs. I limited the sheriff's departments because they're different. And I can give you that. It'll show you from Orange Cove, Visalia, Madera, and we are dead last in comparison to everybody in this. So Orange Cove has more officers per capita than the city of Clovis. I think I can provide you that. So you want everybody like within 30,000 of us, or what's a good range that you'd want to see in comparison?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Oh, you were asking for cities that are more comparable to us to look at? What population range, like 50 plus, 50 less, or? So we're at 130, so would you say anything from 160 to 100,000 would be appropriate, or? Yeah, that's what I'm asking. What would you
So the plus
consider?
or minus on each side?
Correct.
Let's go 30,000. If you need to increase that we can go with that. But right now Clovis is the population of what?
130.
20. So let's go 5% on either side. And then my next question is for your training of your current officers, not new officers or incoming. Can you provide the budget for that training or to keep your current officers?
For the current officers to train the department, like, so things that we're required to do for post standards that we need to provide ongoing
So
training?
yes, yearly.
Okay. We do a majority of that in-house, so I could go back and look at all of our training days and see how much overtime was associated. Otherwise, it would be with people that are on duty that are doing the training, but I'll get you that answer. Let me go to Noah and then I'll come back to you.
All right, awesome. I was going to ask you, oh. All right, so I apologize, everyone. I promise I'll figure out a microphone. You had mentioned that in 2007, you were at 113 officers, and obviously there's a change in the population size. At about that time, were you where you needed to be, right? Like, what was that per capita number? Is there some kind of because you said that this is where we need to be. Is that where we were?
At that time, in 2006, the study was recommended that they had additional officers to get to, I believe, 1.3 was what they were recommending. At the time, you're going to test my memory, but I think they were at 1.2. Basically, if we were at the same per capita rating they were back then, we would need 50 additional officers today to be, if we were what they were when they did the study last time, is what I talked about in my original presentation. So I think it was 1.25 is what it was. If you roll that with today's population, was 50 more officers today that we would need. I would love to have that. I don't think we need it. We can do the job without that by, I think, adding CSOs and other staff that we have over the years has been more efficient. And our CSOs are amazing. They handle a ton of calls. Our dispatchers are also like a call diversion unit. Some agencies, large agencies have, when you call in, if it's not 911, it goes to a unit that kind of decides, does this need to go to a city, different department, or somewhere else before it gets to the police department's dispatch center. Our dispatchers really do that. We have, a couple 100,000 calls that come in a year. I think it's about 185 that come in, but we actually only dispatch out about 70 to 80,000 calls a year. So they're clearing out 100,000 calls by answering questions, diverting to other city departments, or sending to other agencies if that's where they need to go. So, so I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it absolutely did. And I did have just one other follow-up question. Do you track what the current turnover rate is? I know obviously you have people who are retiring out, but what's the turnover rate in general within the department?
Like a percentage of every year. Like right now for this coming year, last year was completely unexpected. It was, I think they called it the Great Resignation, and we saw that at our department. This coming year, there's really only one person that typically we know 6 months to a year, hey, I'm retiring, and they give us plenty of notice. So I have a lieutenant that's retiring towards the end of the year. That's the only person I'm aware of right now. But it doesn't mean that's going to change. And I think in my 2 years being chief, I've seen things can change dramatically very quick. So really right now we're looking good at retaining what we currently have. One officer that was going to retire last year, I kept him on and plugged him in as a background investigator. So he's basically going out and interviewing and doing the backgrounds on people we're hiring. And I told him that the day we get fully staffed, you can either go back to patrol or you can retire. So just trying to find ways to keep people on, to use their experience to help us in getting where we need to be. So right now it's, I guess 1% is what we're looking at. But like I told you, 10% of the department can go. So it could be 10% or it could be 1. I'm hoping it's 1.
And you mentioned we lost 14, half to other agencies. What time frame was that for?
So for last year, the last 12 months, we lost 14 people. Slightly over half of those were going to other agencies. The other half were actually retirements. One was retired 2 years before he could even collect his. So he retired at 48. You can't really retire and collect a pension until 50. He just said, I'm done. I'm going to go find something else to do, and I'll wait 2 years to collect my pension. So we've seen a little bit of everything in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Just for this committee and for me, just the inner workings of the city. How are you allocated personnel? I mean, does the city council say, okay, you get 100, 110, 130 sworn officers, or is it a budget number for sworn officers? Because you talk about the attrition rate. So let's say 10 left. Do you automatically get a higher 10 more because that was the number that you started with? Or do you have to get approval even for those additional 10 to replace 10 that left?
So it's an allocated position. So if my boss says you have 110 and during that year 10 leave, 15 leave, I can fill all those positions because it's been budgeted. Then when we go into the next budget cycle, I'm always going, can I have more? And it's either, yes, we're going to give you 2 more. So in the 5-year plan right now, I think we have 3 every year that are in the 5-year plan to add 3 more additional officers. That's been in the past. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on, you know, if the money's coming in and we can afford to do it, we'll do it. If it's not, then let's say it was built for 3 more next year. We get the budget and say, hey, we can't afford that. We're going to give you 1. And then I'll have that 1 additional position. Correct. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, let me go this way. I'm sorry.
Thank you. First, I just want to say that being old Clovis, I miss the days when the joke sort of was the criminals didn't come to Clovis because they were afraid. And I wish we could get back to that.
We still have people many times that go, oh man, I didn't realize I was in Clovis. When they get arrested, I wouldn't have came here. So that's still occurring because even though it's the justice system kind of broken right now and the jail system and things that are outside of our control, we will still arrest you. We'll still take you down to county. Even though you're going to get released in 2 hours, we're still going to do that. And a lot of cities aren't doing that. And so people know when they come here, there's going to be an inconvenience factor if you commit crime in our city. So that still is occurring. It's diminishing because they'll go on our social media now after we make a post about an arrest and then start making fun that, yeah, I'm going to be out in 2 hours. I just got out 2 hours later and I'm going to go commit crime again in your city. So it makes our job very difficult for sure.
And then what I really wanted to ask, I was actually at your original presentation at the city council meeting. Could you tell us a little more about, you mentioned the hotels and all the issues that now that we're becoming a bigger city and having more of those establishments, what that's causing us?
Yeah, so we're becoming a big city and we're starting to see the big city problems. So I had brought up hotels in the last 10 years have probably at least doubled, if not more. There's a couple more in the process planned right now. We have seen, I think, second in the nation in occupancy rate. We're like one of the highest cities that our hotels are completely occupied most of the time, which is great. But on the backside, the things that we see, it creates a lot of issues for us and people's cars getting broken into, people coming here and doing fraud. We've had a couple gun manufacturing operations that we've found out inside of hotels. We do human trafficking operations where we'll set up in a hotel and we start, you know, having people come in that are finding pimps and stuff that are basically using our hotels to prostitute young girls. So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. But the hotels alone in the last 2 years have increased in calls for service by 200, and I think it was 98%. So they're definitely a drain. They are a good thing, but it creates issues for us. The other one was the hospital. You know, this great facility we're at brings more people from outside, you know, our city into here. The hospital is great. The cancer center, we have a VA coming in, I think in the next 5 years or so that's going to be built. Those are all great things, but they bring issues for the police department to have to address. And the last one, the Department of Social Services, is something I brought up, that they're taking over all of the telco buildings. And great, beautiful facility. They've done an amazing job. We're starting to see increased calls because, I mean, there's a lot of people coming in during the day that work there and a lot of people coming in for services. So we're seeing an increase in calls, but it really hasn't been fully occupied yet. The child services part hasn't opened up yet. So we really don't know the true impacts of that. So as new projects come online and developments happen, as we're building north of Shepherd now, I drive by there every day and it's just like, oh my God, these houses are coming out of the ground so fast. But those are more families that are living there, more potential, you know, thefts or crimes that occur. And I have the same amount of officers or less that I have to try to respond to these calls. So it's concerning for me. And then on top of it, when I brought up the second slide, the contract, you know, when that happened, I woke up in the middle of the night and told John, my boss, and I said, I couldn't sleep because Not only do I have a staffing issue, I have a huge issue now with being competitive with other agencies in the Valley. It's a huge concern for me. And I don't want to make it about money, but if you're not competitive with your partners next door, it's going to make our job extremely difficult. We're not going to get the quality candidates that we expect here in the city. And it's just going to it's going to spiral into making things even more difficult.
Now, I'm going to make just a quick comment before you go to the next question. Reference to what you're commenting on right now. Most people here know that I was with Clovis Unified for many years on the school board. And so taking a look at salaries, we would evaluate up and down the valley as well as other comparable districts, other districts that had employees of 6,000 and had students of 44,000 like Clovis Unified. And that's how we would evaluate what are they paying, what are they at, where do we stand? And we were never at the top, but we were never at the bottom. And the point I wanted to make was that at that time, 2016, Clovis was considered, as our police department, a destination employment. To get to Clovis was what people worked towards. I remember in 2016 greeting teachers, the 200 that we hired that year, and about 80% of them, I would ask, why are you coming to Clovis? They were from Sanger, they were from Merced, they were from LA, they were from all over. And the main reason, because they had better packages, better salaries, they said, because we know that Clovis Unified has our back. So they wanted to come here. Today, that doesn't hold anymore. Today, it's a different type of competitive environment. We had to meet salary-wise, financial-wise, the competition. It no longer was, oh, well, I just want to go to Clovis. No, I just don't want to just come and be a Clovis police. I need the package to support my family in a competitive environment. So that's probably what we're facing now at the law enforcement level. Not just like, oh, I want to go to Clovis because that's an ultimate destination. There are other factors there.
Yeah. And we use, just so you guys know, we don't just want to match, we're competing against Fresno PD. That's because they're a much larger city. We have 9 cities that we traditionally compare ourselves when we're doing bargaining to say these are comparable cities to our size, and we want to fall in a certain range in that market to say that we're meeting that. So we do take Fresno into factor because in recruitment purposes locally, that they're going to consume all the people coming out of the academy if we're not somewhat competitive with them. But we do look at 9 other cities for comparison purposes. I'll go in order. I'm sorry. I'll go with you.
Thank you so much, Chief Fleming. First question, and I don't know if we want to table this one for next time, Mr. Holt, if you want to weigh in. My question, first one, probability of saturation. I had a question about that. I know you guys mentioned you're going to talk about staffing next week. Do we want to hold that one?
Probability of saturation.
I'll go and ask. Just hold it down. I'll go and ask it. No, I do. Okay. Team effort. Thank you. Sorry. And I know a lot of people have questions, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. Probability of saturation, reading from this report that we were given to go over, is defined as the probability that when the next call for service arrives at the dispatching center, there will be no free units available to take that call. So my first question is, do we ever exceed that threshold?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think like the example I gave you in the 16-hour period of time, we exceeded that by that entire day where we many times weren't able to respond to calls. And we had, 15, 16 calls holding that we're just not responding to.
Okay, so it's happening. We're exceeding that threshold on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I have on my phone, I have an app that I can look at our current calls for service. And typically when we look at that, I'm looking at the guys I work with, but when we typically look at that day to day, it could be 9 to 10 calls holding at any point. So it's not like there's no calls and people are free that 18 minutes that the study says driving around and there's no calls. A majority of the time, there's always some calls holding. We try to encourage our people that if you see something that's a crime occurring and the call is less of a priority, unfortunately, we need to handle that and have this hold. So we're having to make those decisions now, which it kills our officers because they like to clear the board and have not citizens not waiting for us to respond, and then go out and do the proactive enforcement. But there's a more detailed, I think, in his report. And also, I didn't mention, but Tim Friesmeyer that did the report, as part of his contract, he had like one final thing he could come and present to council. Council passed on that. So he still is willing to do it. Even for this group, I could probably have him virtually come in he lives in Arkansas. And if there's questions specific on his study, he would be more than happy to answer those. I'll try to, I guess I answered that. You don't need any further on that.
No, you did. Thank you. Yeah, sadly.
Okay.
Sad. I mean,
Just to piggyback on that real quick, you mentioned at one point, if the calls are serious enough, we will call in Fresno County SO or Fresno PD.
Yeah, we assist county sometimes if they get tied up and their deputies, because they have a huge area to cover. And so they'll rely on us and sometimes Fresno if there's a call in Tarpey or somewhere that's in the county area and they have deputies that are a long ways out, that they'll call and ask us to help. So we do the same thing. We have a great relationship with all the law enforcement agencies in the Valley. But sometimes, Fresno's got calls holding for 2 days. And if I call and say, hey, can you come help us? A lot of times they don't have people to send. So it's usually us in the county that are really working close together to make sure our citizens get the needs met.
thank you, Chief. Last question. Can we pull up the slide where you had your 10 biggest line items? Back to the budget. And I know that was a big number. You mentioned that your number was 68%. So in the since 2000.
The round pie there.
Yeah. So since 2012, the budget's increased, or rather public safety's increased 60%, while the overall total revenues for the city have increased just over 73%. So my question was, are these, let's take line item number 1, salaries. Have salaries increased by 5.9 million in the last 10 years? And that's what's absorbing that, because it sounds like I'm at least perceiving like some sort of surplus here. And you're saying, no, that's not the case. Can you add more context to that?
Mm-hmm. So that 68% that we've increased over 10 years, these line items right here, these 10 represent 93% of that 68%. So if that makes sense. So how about this? 68% is $15.4 million in 10 years. 93% of that 15.4 is in these 10 line items. So these are increases. So the salaries have increased in 10 years, $5.9 million. So the 170 employees we have, and we give them a 2% raise for the last 3 years, that goes into that increase of that 5.9 is what that number is representing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I just asked because in 2021 from 2020, public safety budget saw a $4.2 million increase. And so I'm just trying to get context on it. We all think like, oh, you got, $4 million. What are you doing with it? Sounds like you're saying we're treading water.
You're saying the current budget year, this year, that 4 million? So I can answer that.
Yeah.
That 4 million increase, and I was going to cover that, but there's a lot of things that you think you're going to cover and you forget. Everybody got his 2% raise in this last fiscal year from the 3-year ago contract that we had. This is a final year. So part of that is the 2% raise of that 4 million. The other very large part of that is we have deferred vehicle purchases from back in 2009, 2010 that we just said we were cutting positions out when the market crashed. We stopped buying vehicles and deferring them and just extending the life of vehicles. So finally, this year we had enough, I don't know what the proper term is, but we had enough money to be able to purchase those vehicles. So we put in an additional probably $30 million to purchase 32 vehicles. The problem is we can't find vehicles right now. So we have the money to buy them, but there's no cars out there because of the chip shortage and everybody else is fighting for cars. So we finally have the ability to get caught up from 2009, 2010. And that's what that large jump is this year for that budget increase. Sorry, we've been waiting so long.
Obviously, when you were working on this number last year for the 16 patrol officers and 16 investigations, you knew that the contract with the officers was coming up this July. Obviously not asking you what you thought that number was going to be going to contract negotiations, but it was not going to be the 14% that FPOA received from the city of Fresno.
Yeah.
Right, obviously. Obviously, it is very, very important to stay not only competitive, but to be, the best. When you come up with that $9 million number, is that factoring into what you think now the new increased number will be this July? Or is that going to be, because you quoted 9 million, we're looking at a 14% increase. That's an additional $1 million in just increase of salaries on a new working contract, correct?
Correct. That at the time was strictly what does an officer cost right now today? And how many do we need today to be where we should be? And that's how that number was factored with the current salary rate of a community service officer, dispatcher, animal control, and those police officers. That doesn't factor in any future raises, any of that. So yeah, exactly. So if the city was to match what Fresno got, yeah, we'd have to increase 14% into that 9.2. Well, I don't know, because I don't know what a community service officer is going to get, because it's really
Sure.
based on how do they compare to other departments in those positions.
Now, obviously, it's going to be on this commission a recommendation if we are going forward with something, however we get to that number. But with the city going into negotiations with the union, we're not going to have that whole number yet, because you guys are, unless you're going to say that there's going to be a new contract before the end of this these 8 meetings. We're not going to know that whole number yet, right? That you're going to be asking for, because you're still going to be in negotiations with the police union.
I'll tell you this, and I told my boss, John Holt, this, that we are extremely short-staffed, but I would rather at this point, if I had 8 vacancies right now, I will have 6 vacancies after the 16th. I would rather get rid of those additional positions that I'm asking for and we direly need to stay competitive. Because if we're not competitive and I can't recruit to fill future vacancies, we've lost it. And staffing is a huge issue for public safety, but if we can't recruit and retain our staff, that's a way bigger issue for us.
No, and I 100% agree. It just would be nice to be able to hopefully have that number if we're going to be going to the general public asking for whatever it is to pay for this, that we don't have to come back to them in 12 months or 24 months mid-contract with the police union to make sure that we have everything we need. We just knock it out at one time and at least be able to come back to us and say, hey, this is what we think the number is going to be. We think we're going to have to go to that 14% or whatever it is, but something to where if we have to go to the public and say, hey, we need help with this. And I think that we all want what you need, because we want a safe neighborhood. Let's do it once. Let's not nickel and dime it. If it's a new number, let's get to that number and ask for it for one time instead of having to come back and back and back and back again.
I agree. Did you? Okay. All right. Oh, let me go. Wait, are you from the public or a committee? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir. I didn't know you had any committee. Wait.
Okay. Chief, you mentioned Orange Cove a while back, and not that I'm making any comparison, but you mentioned that their per capita ratio was exceeded ours.
Correct.
If we were to compare our 10 line items to their 10 line items, would we find that those to be similar in that salaries are 1, retirements number 2, et cetera?
No, not at all. And that's why I use the 10 city or the cities that are over 100,000 to really show you the per capita. I was just giving you that if you look in the valley, no matter what size the city is, from a Kingsburg to a Visalia that's larger than us to a Fresno Police Department, we are the lowest staffed per capita. And now if you did a budget analysis to say police budgets and compared to populations of those cities, I think that would be a much more interesting analysis to do.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And would it be possible to get any of that type of information?
We've done it, and I think we can provide something to you. I think we're having finance kind of confirm our numbers, because before we put anything out, we do stuff, and then we want our finance department to say, we agree, concur with this before we put anything out, because we want to be on the same page. We've done something with our 9 comparison cities that we currently look at when we do negotiations for salaries and stuff. And we've compared to those, the city's budget and population to get that number. So that's something I think we can provide to you when we do the budget presentation. But I don't want to throw it out now and be off a little bit compared to what finance says, but we have done that and we're getting it confirmed. I think that's something we'll present to you, because I think it's very valuable to, are we spending way more than other cities comparable? Are we spending way low? Are we right in the middle for what we expect? Something else just to think about is we are a full service department. Not every other city does animal control, does a pet adoption center, does youth services, does graffiti abatement, does code enforcement. That is not, I can tell you the city of Fresno, code enforcement is not in their budget. Their animal control is not in their budget. Their graffiti abatement's not in their budget. Those are all things that we do and that come out of our police department budget, or all these other things that cities typically aren't under the police department. So that's also something you got to consider too when you're looking at that.
There. I was actively involved with the city at a time when Clovis was really a destination. I sat on the Personnel Commission at that time, and this is back in 2000 approximately. And we would interview multiple times a month for entry-level candidates for police. The chief would interview perhaps hundreds of candidates to find someone to hire. And the chief actually had open spots to hire to, and he couldn't find anyone that he was necessarily completely sold on. So my question, I suppose, is how do we maintain that level quality of officer if we're no longer a destination?
And I think it goes back to, I would probably go with less staff to stay competitive, because it is so much more important to have people. And gone are the days, even for the city of Clovis, gone are the days of we open up a position, we have one officer and 300 or 400 people apply for it. That is not the case. We have continually, our application or position is open, continuous for lateral officers, and we're interviewing constantly to find that quality person that we want here working at our department.
We interviewed lateral transfers from all over the state. It wouldn't be unusual to have in a night when we're interviewing 15 people to have 5 of them being from several hundred miles away. It was very common.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I know a lot of what we're talking about is just growth in Clovis, and we've talked a lot about population, but I think it's also important to recognize the geographic area that's increased as well. And comparative to where we were 2006 or any other point, that obviously is an impact on your ability to provide service as well. And I know that when the discussion goes on for growth, for annexing and increasing the sphere of influence for this city and all those things, it seems that other areas have almost like built-in deals with that, where you see the Loma Vista area has a fire station that's been kind of promised to them and the staffing for that. And I mean, obviously separately, but with the school districts, there's always going to be plans for additional schools in the areas that are growing. Is there anything comparable for the police department where they're having to cover more territory? I mean, obviously more people, but anything that is kind of planned out for that growth?
No, I think departments have always gone trying to use a per capita number, something to say we need to stay in this ratio to grow. But for policing, it's very difficult. We're always asking for more as the city grows, but we don't have anything built in. I agree, like the fire station, get so far out, our response times are going to be beyond this, so we need to build a new station. Public utilities, you know, your trash, we built a new development of 200 homes. We maybe need to add a new garbage truck. I don't know how it works, but you have more payers coming into the system that are paying the trash bill. We buy a new truck, hire a new person, and we service that area. It's all built in. But for us, that's not the case. So it makes it very difficult to. We're always constantly asking for more positions, but there is no ratio. There's no formula for policing.
So is there a why that would be, or anyone who could answer why the police department wouldn't be factored into those considerations?
I think that's a nationwide. That's why they're staffing, like kind of in my original presentation, there's really 5 ways to staff a police department. And this one is the best one. It could be because it's unique to our circumstances, our city, the type of calls we go to, what staff we need here. And so we went out and spent the money, did that study over a year-long period of time, looked at the last 5 years of call data to say, this person outside of me, the chief, because I'm going to ask for more. This person's coming in who does these studies all the time is saying, based on this, you need these many officers to be at this ratio. So that really is our best formula to say we need to grow, outside of me just coming in and saying, based on my expertise and the department where it's at, this is where we need to be. Yeah. Sir.
Chief, and Gary, I don't know if you can bring up the slide that showed all the different different projects that the police department's in, and then all the different services that are no longer that cuts in last 15 years slide. Yes. One more, go to the right. Yes, that one. So if you were to receive that 1 point, what's the number again that were the goal?
1.15 to 1.2, somewhere in there would be.
So if that were to happen, would any of those eliminated services come back online?
Oh, absolutely. The goal is if I can put those 16 back, we're going to grow our investigative unit. So in my original presentation, I talked about our detective unit. Back in 1974, we had 4 detectives. 50 years later, almost 48 today, we have 8 detectives. So the population during that time has increased by 500,000%, and we've grown 50% in staffing. So I want to staff those appropriately, so that'll allow us to grow our detective units to where they should be. It would allow what is our gang and narcotics team that's combined. There's 3 and 1 sergeant. Realistically, they should be, 6 to 7 in a sergeant, so they can actually go out and do surveillance. They can potentially serve a search warrant on their own without having to rely on detectives and them combining to go out and do that. So it would allow them to do a lot more just by adding some bodies to those units. It would allow our traffic unit to grow to where it should be. The city of Madera has 7 motor officers. We have 2. We're a lot bigger city, and we had 5 traffic fatalities last year. Our crashes have increased, our injury collisions have increased. Those are things that we need to address. Our youth services enforcement has been shut down really once 2008, 2009, DARE, PAL, all that went away. I would love to get back in the schools. We have a huge fentanyl problem right now in the school districts. To get back in and doing drug education in all the schools, being really a partner with the schools like we used to, and we're not doing those things today. So yes, to answer your question, those bodies would allow us to get back to where we were doing business 15 years ago.
We have more comments or questions with our committee before I open up to public comments?
Yeah, we got one right here.
I did want to ask, can we get a number of where exactly your monies come from? Like what percentage? I mean, I'm ignorant to, is it property taxes or sales tax?
What's that? Next week we'll get, yeah, because I'm ignorant to that too as well. Sure.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm doing a little math here, Jay. I'm going to put myself out there and perhaps embarrass myself and show how naive I am about these things. But the chief's basically asking for about $9 million over the course of several years, $9 million a year added to the budget. And I think if I understand it right, we have about 39,000 households in the city of Clovis, give or take. And if my math is right, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but let's just say we were to ask the citizens of Clovis to pick up that burden. My math shows that to be about $20 per month per household. I would be interested to know, perhaps at the next meeting, if you have time to do the math, if I'm right on that, or if I'm way off, which admittedly I may be. If that number is accurate, though, I got to admit, I've been here long enough to see my utility bill go up in bigger increments than that, and I think without the assistance of a citizens committee. So I don't know if there's something different about this particular budget item that I'm missing. Why is this one grabbing so much attention and requiring so much, I don't know, input from the citizens, as opposed to, say, an equivalent increase with a utility bill? But again, this all comes back to whether or not my math is even right. So if you could check that, I'd be interested to know.
My boss says it's right.
And not to answer for them, but I can tell you the part of where that funding comes from, where the general fund is the police and fire and parks, rec, senior services. Those things that you're talking about, those utility increases, are out of enterprise funds. And there's a different way of increasing those funds just based on the way the city operates and things that have been passed, that we can't do that because we're all general fund tax dollar generated. So it makes a difference on how we can increase
Yeah.
the cost.
Understood that the money comes from different places. But from the resident's perspective, as a resident of Clovis, I pay the bill from one place, and that's my bank account, regardless of how the city allocates it. And so I was just curious kind of how these numbers you are asking for compare to some of the other increases we see in services. I think it's important because it keeps things in perspective. It's one thing to sit here and talk about $9 million, which sounds like such a huge number, but scale matters. And to me, it was interesting to know what that actually translates to the average citizen. What does $9 million mean for me and my household? And it sounds like John has confirmed that my math is probably right, that in a perfect world, if you were to get the full $9 million, we're talking about $20 a month per household. So thank you.
I think the comments and the questions that you received this evening, you probably agree, Kurt, are fantastic. Excellent. And we have a lot of concerned citizens here. A lot of them are kind of geared around some of the financial questions, and I believe that's in our program to be addressed at our next meeting. Yep. And so again, feel free to email us or the city, Carrie? Andy, our questions and comments, and he'll be sure to incorporate them into our next meeting and presentation. And if everyone's okay, I think we're going to get close to closing it up. Are we okay there, everyone? That was my next issue here. So our meeting is now open to any public comments at this time, if we have any. Yes, sir, go ahead in the back.
Thank you. I'm a resident, and I haven't really seen any bikes. Are you guys on bikes?
Motorcycles or like actual bicycles?
Bicycles.
Well, we had a bike unit, but that's been cut as well. We no longer do.
What do you think about bikes on the trails? Do you think that might help?
Bicycles are amazing. Getting through the alleyways and the trails, we utilize them a lot for special operations and in certain neighborhoods we're having problems with. You can sneak up on people without them seeing you coming. But it takes time. We got to train every quarterly to make sure people are in compliance so we don't get people getting injured. We got to maintain that equipment. It's an ancillary position. It's not a full-time assignment. So normally a patrol officer that's out working the beat every day would jump on a bike to do something for a special operation or come in on overtime to do that. So it's not a full-time unit that we've ever had at our department.
That's a great comment, observation on their part. I assume that your comments, you would be comfortable seeing this come back.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Any further comments? All right, thank you again very much to all the committee and to all the staff and to Chief Fleming for all the input this evening. And please continue, committee, throwing your questions and comments to Andy, and we can incorporate them into our meeting coming up next time. Thank you all. There being no further business, meeting's adjourned.